I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's a special board meeting, so we can't change the agenda. There's nothing, no other pieces. So the only item on the agenda is the strategic planning. So I don't know if it's Jeremy or Gail or.
Turn it over to Gail, if that's okay. Well, thanks for taking time to meet with me this evening. I hope that everything's been going well with all of you since we met a couple weeks ago. And our agenda for this evening is to do a brief review of the strategic planning process. Then we'll take a look at your draft plan on a page, almost hot off the press, behind the scenes in the last couple weeks, including holiday time in there. Your superintendent has done a yeoman's job of helping pull everything together with the plan on a page based on the information that your committee, your strategic planning committee, shared with you. So, and then we'll wrap up by reviewing the board self-assessment that you took. And I'm going to use that to tie everything together for you as you implement your new strategic plan. So with that, just a quick review of the process, which started back in March, even earlier than that, in putting dates together and identifying a strategic planning committee. And then you'll remember that we gathered information at the beginning of the process through both internal and external surveys. In your district, you had 43 internal responses and 394 external responses to the survey. So that gave us a good indicator of some of the strengths and some of the opportunities. And then we had a couple days of listening sessions. On May 18th, I had an opportunity to meet with your superintendent and administrative team. I met with middle school and high school students, had an opportunity for staff to meet. And then on the 19th, an opportunity for community members to participate in a listening session. And also I had a chance to meet with you as Board of Education. So with that information between the surveys and listening sessions, we compiled a stakeholder engagement report that was shared at the first of 3 strategic planning committee meetings. And at that first meeting, your superintendent also provided an update on the school district. And that information helped lead the committee to focus areas or themes for your strategic plan. And then as the process unfolded, we talked about some of the foundational elements of the strategic plan, core values, mission statement, belief statements, and beliefs. Core values, belief statements, mission, and vision statement. And then we wrapped up at the 3rd meeting by just kind of reviewing everything with the process and looking at some draft goals and objectives. And after that meeting, that's when your superintendent dug in and did a lot of fine tuning to the strategic plan. And we've created that plan on a page. I want to commend you for the committee that you identified. They seem to be very engaged. I thought you had a nice cross section of stakeholders, and I think that they gave you some really, really good feedback. And I think that as a board, you should feel really comfortable about the feedback that they provided you with, because again, it does reflect the values and the voices of a cross section of stakeholders through the listening sessions, the surveys, and your strategic planning committee. So with that, let's take a look at your plan on a page. I'm going to do a screen share, and I believe that you have that in front of me, or in front of you. Is that correct? That you have it too? Okay, perfect. And are you able to see that on the screen?
Yep.
Okay, very good. So here we go with the plan on a page, and what you see first are the belief statements, and we use those values that we asked values that we asked stakeholders to identify in the surveys, we use those values during the strategic planning committee meeting to help lead us to belief statements or value statements. And this was something that you did not have in your former, current, or soon to be former strategic plan. So here are the belief statements.
I just want to, sorry, I just want to be specific. So in our board book, this is called Becker's Strategic Plan Draft number 2 with a 7/13 date on it. So
yes.
The document.
Right. Yes, correct. Thanks for clarifying that. And the reason that it says draft number 2 is that there was a first one that I created after I got the feedback from your superintendent. And then he took a look at it and we made a few more revisions. A lot of it was more just grammar, punctuation, things like that to clean it up a bit. So that's why it says draft number 2. Once you are ready to approve this, we will have one that is called the final. And I'll send that to you and you can officially adopt that at a subsequent meeting. Does that help answer the question for you?
Yeah, I just wanted to be specific about what we have.
Great.
Can you also, I'm sorry, can you also mention, so it says on it 2022 to 2027. So this is be a 5-year plan.
5-year, correct.
Okay.
Correct. All right. And so the belief statements that you see in front of you are the belief statements that your strategic planning committee helped create. And they actually had a chance after they created these to vote on them between the second and the third meeting. And then at the third meeting, they had a chance to take one more look, provide feedback on the belief statement. So you can see there are 5 of them. I think when we talk during the process, a lot of times we think usually a minimum of 4, maximum of 8. So kind of landed right in the middle. And again, your belief statements reflect the values that were identified by the strategic planning committee. Then mission statement. So you had a mission statement and there was consideration of continuing with that mission statement. And at the last meeting, some discussion, and I think Chair Swanson, you might have even brought this up to maybe take a look at that mission statement one more time. So this one is where the group landed with a mission statement. Prepare self-directed learners to thrive in a changing global community. So more of a revision than a rewrite. Your vision statement. This is some, go ahead. Do you have questions, comments?
It is the same mission statement when, we had talked about a couple of different words.
Okay, I was thinking that the word community, I thought world was in that former one.
No.
Okay.
One of these statements is like, that number 4 statement there.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for clarifying that. All righty. And actually, maybe I don't want to go too fast on this either. I should back up for a second. Anything on the belief statements that you'd like to comment on or talk about?
No, I mean, I'll start with some comments. So I think that these are actually pretty comprehensive and directly reflect the work that the committee did. I think that's all. These are all solid. I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
I think they do a good job of summing up everything that was discussed in those 3 meetings. And I think it does a good job of capturing the wants of the community and the members that were there.
I tend to agree with that as well. There's a couple words that I worry could cast maybe a little bit too broad of net on here with the example of environment tailored to meet their needs. I guess I would be maybe open to discussing exactly what that means a little bit, and it could be maybe reworded. And then also the second one with emotionally safe and secure learning environment. Again, I'm not exactly sure what that emotionally safe means, where it could be respectful, physically safe and secure learning environment. So That would be my only question, exactly what that means. But other than that, I agree with both Aaron and Mark's assessment.
Okay.
Ryan, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I'll just say that being that I had previous engagements, so I missed virtually the entire discussion piece of this. I'm trusting the committee. I don't see anything blaring in these that would alarm me in any way. So outside of Pete's comments and everyone else's, I mean, there's nothing blaring. I mean, we could fine tune it if we so choose, but I don't have a problem what's on the page as it sits.
Yeah, and so to me, and you know, having followed the whole process and kind of thinking through this, those first of them, to me, the environment tailored to their needs is, if we were going to take that again and look at it, because we look at it with our mission statement, then use those belief statements to enhance or give some detail to it, right? So I think about like the industrial tech. We want to tailor that to meet some needs there. You know, some specific needs that have to be met in those environments. So, you know, tailoring it to that is making sure that we have the right tools, the right equipment, the right, to some extent, curriculum, those types of pieces, so that it's tailored to the needs of our students, age appropriate, all of those types of things.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense in that standpoint, but this, I mean, that took a lot to make that statement make sense, is what I'm saying.
And there are some, that's why I say there are some more pieces behind this as we explore what those things need. Now, on the other side, you talked about the respectful, physically and emotionally safe. I think emotion, to me, and fear might be an emotion. And so one of those things is that I want to make sure that students feel safe to say what they need to say in the classroom, that they don't feel like they're going to be told they can't, that there's ideas that they can't express, that a teacher would tell them, no, you can't say that. Those types of things. They should not feel fear when they say those things.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. So again, in the context of the statement, if in fact that those statements will make more sense as we get by, and I did go through the document. I don't know if it does or not, but that'll be open discussion.
Yeah, and that's how I would think
Sure.
think through using these is the mission, the belief statements, expose that, those types of things.
Right.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Good feedback on that. I appreciate the comments on that. And I would also agree too, that this definitely reflects the discussion from the committee. At the same time, the board has the final say on the strategic plan. So if there are words that you are wanting to change in any way, you certainly have that right and that responsibility as well to do that.
So let me ask this, Gail, and some of the, so I gave some expounding words that are back behind this, knowing the information and that kind of stuff through there. This plan on a page is meant to be a brief summary, kind of high level piece.
Right.
As we look at our policy, maybe there's some additional opportunities to provide that background and detail.
You could certainly do that if you chose to do so.
Okay. So, I mean, we have some opportunity as we look through our policy statement.
Right. And again, I think it's just important that we have something to reflect on. Obviously, it's a broad statement, right? So people can take that to mean many different things. So if we have that extra background, as you suggested, I think it would probably be in our best interest.
And then keep in mind that with the belief statements, you'll want to go back to these when you're making those, what we call the critical or the big decisions. So if you're struggling as a board to come to consensus on whatever it might be, come back to what is it that we believe. And you can say we believe because it truly is we, all of your stakeholders within the Becker School District. So that's how you'll use these as well. And then the belief statements should be reflected in your mission statement. So you can think about that as you look at your mission statement and the belief statements that have been created.
Yeah, and I think that was my comments during the
Mhm.
last meeting, and
Mhm.
still, because this mission statement is our current mission statement, we
Mhm.
change it. So again, I'll restate what I had said at the last meeting. So those first two bullet items both talk about environment in
Mhm.
a couple of different ways. In our mission statement, we don't mention environment. You can infer it through, what things can we affect to prepare self-directed
Mhm.
learners? Environment would be one of those things, and then use the belief statements behind it. We might want to talk about, just mention, something about creating an environment to prepare self-directed learners, and all of that kind of stuff could be something we could add to this. Again, I'm not sure that it's necessary, but I wanted to make sure that we have the discussion, as we have this opportunity to make these modifications.
Mhm. And again, you certainly could make those modifications to it. I was just looking back at the notes from the third meeting as well with mission statement. We talked about it defines the present state or purpose of the school district. So you can look at yours in relation to that. Defines the present state or purpose of the school. It answers the questions, what result and for whom and why we exist. And ask the question, does the mission statement reflect the district's beliefs? So those were kind of the three takeaways. Also, we talked about it being concise, 7 to 15 words, and not be wimpy.
I think
Mhm.
one of the things that was brought up was the preparing or prepare.
Mhm.
I think if you guys remember that, they wanted to come up with, maybe a different word.
Yeah, we talked about building, constructing, creating, developing. Those
Right.
were some of the other words
And I think,
talked about.
Aaron brought up the developing, and to me, I thought that was probably the best word if we were going to swap out prepare.
Mhm.
So again, could probably leave that up to some more discussion
Mhm.
if we wanted to change it.
Yeah, and I pulled the notes too from your discussion that evening. And as we talk through this, a couple things that I think the final comment really does connect to what you just said. Develop self-directed learners to thrive in an ever-changing global environment. That was one of the notes that I had made. So, I mean, again, still open for consideration from you as board members. And you don't have to decide this evening either. You can think about it. The idea is that you'll walk through this plan this evening, and it'll likely be that you'll bring this back to at least one more board meeting for a review again before you do a final adoption.
Jeremy, you had a drafting team. I don't know if it was more than just yourself.
That's correct. We, so the principals were involved in it. Ms. Nolan was involved in it as well. Actually, because this process took place prior to some people leaving the district, those people were involved in it as well. So we met and created this draft plan over a couple days over the last week or so. And yeah, we talked about those words that we had from the notes: to building, constructing, creating, preparing or developing, and then the community to environment as well. And we just felt that the mission does a good job of explaining the mission of the district. And is there a need to change that one word? Does it create that much difference in what we end up with at the end anyway? Is what we talked about in our conversation.
And so you made a choice to not change it.
Correct. Yep. So this whole draft plan came from that group. we didn't think that those other words did anything more for the mission statement or enough, maybe even if it did change it enough at all. We were just replacing word with a word, and if there's more meaning to one of those words for some of you, then maybe that's different, but we just couldn't find.
And so that's what I was looking up, because I had looked this up earlier, and so the reason that I was thinking that develop might be a better word is prepare is just like you do a bunch of stuff ahead of something, right? When you say develop, you have a direction that you're going. You're aimed at something. So it's more in a direction versus throwing a bunch of stuff on the table ahead of somebody being there.
Sure.
That's kind of what the word means when I looked it up.
The other thing I did share with them is I know we talked about this a year, maybe 2 years ago when we talked about the mission statement, and I know the first word didn't come up, but the word thrive is the one that they came up at the table. If you remember that conversation during the board meeting when I don't remember when it was last August or maybe even 2 years ago, but so I did share that with that team as well. And like the board has discussed this recently. And so that was part of our decision too, just to keep it the same.
I kind of would agree with Mark. And we talked about this a little bit at our last strategic meeting is prepare, like you said, prepare seems like there's an end result. Like I'm preparing for the test or I'm preparing for a trip and there's something going to happen and it's over.
You get ready for it.
Life doesn't ever end. Well, it doesn't, but we're preparing our kids that we want them to be developed to go out and be prepared for what they face. So we had that discussion at the table in our strategic plan. It's like, it's a word. I mean, I guess the importance behind it is what it means to us and how it guides us. Prepare versus develop. I don't know if in general, if there's really that big of a difference between the two words, but
It seemed to be the word that garnered the most attention, I think, after Mark had brought it up, right? It was even the students that were part of the committee. And while both of them are pretty similar words, I mean, I think if develop is probably better. And if we're going to change something, this is the time to actually change it. So probably again would be, I'd be open to further discussion on it.
And just so, I mean, our mission statement, when I send these emails out to staff, thanking them during the school year and things, and our actual mission statement is preparing, and I think we would use developing as well. But I thank them for helping to prepare self-directed learners and things like that. So I use prepare and preparing, depending on how you put it in the sentence as well. But and I think we would do the same thing with develop and developing if that's what you'd like to switch it to. So I mean, when you see the words at the beginning, are they usually like the ing with the action piece of that?
It really depends upon what the board is comfortable with. So I've seen it done both ways. So I think, whatever your rationale is based on all the things you listened in on and participated in during the strategic planning process, that's what you should go with. So you could do developing self-directed learners or develop self-directed learners. And I am hearing consensus that you'd like to move to the word develop for sure. And that's perfect. That's good feedback and sound feedback based on all the discussion.
Ryan, what are your thoughts? You weren't here for that discussion. So what are your thoughts between those two words?
I guess I would say the argument for developing based on how it was presented makes a lot of sense. Your comment about prepare, there's an end result, makes a lot of sense. So I guess if I was going to make a choice based on this conversation, I would lean towards develop because the school's mission to get kids ready is never ending, which is why I think we would switch it to develop or developing versus prepared.
And I spend too much time with words sometimes because I work on several committees and international and those types of things and trying to come up with the right words to mean. And by adding the ing, it is that more action. Where you develop sounds like I make a decision and then I don't have to have any more involvement in that. When I say developing, it's kind of a ongoing thing.
So
You
then,
keep going,
so then the next,
developing.
you know, we try to keep the statement concise, and all of that is adding the word ever in front of changing something that we should consider too, because as we all know, the world, the way we knew the world isn't the way it is now, which isn't going to be in the future when our kids are older and they're having kids, and the whole generational effect, everything so is it something to consider to put that word in to stimulate that as well, or do we just leave it as is? I mean, since we're talking about changing one word for another, we might as well at least.
Well, and that is in the beliefs. We utilize that ever changing in belief statements.
We did. And so it's, to me, that's where we're just adding a word to add a word.
Nope.
That doesn't really add any value because it is changing. Changing is, it's still continuing to change type of thing. That's what the ing on that means, is it's continuing to change. So I think that just puts an extra word in there without adding any differences.
Fair enough.
It's like the word the. Lots of times.
Well, and the definition of
Yeah.
prepare, make someone ready or able to do or deal with something, which is singular, right? Develop, grow or cause to grow and become more mature, advanced, or elaborate. So it has more of a farther reaching, continuous.
So I do hear the consensus too, Gail, with the developing. And I don't think the ever is necessary then, because it adds a word without changing any meaning or adding any value. So. Now, again, you had, Jeremy, you had the team that was kind of working on this. Do you think that they would have any problems with that? I mean, it's hard for, I know it's.
I don't know, 3 of them are in
I'm
the
asking-
audience. I don't think
Well,
so.
I'm asking you to represent it too,
Yeah,
so.
I don't think so. I think developing does, we didn't go into a ton of detail on this part. We did more on the other pieces of it.
Okay.
And maybe because of the statement I made with the board just talked about this a year ago. But developing, it talks about kind of this, there's stages of preparedness that are in developing,
Okay.
that word. So yeah, I don't think they'd have.
To me, developing is more of a interaction, like prepare puts it on us as the school district, and developing to me includes students in there. I mean, it's more interactive word, I think.
Okay. All right. I like that. I think we can move forward.
Okay, good discussion on that. I appreciate it. Vision statement. So in the past, you did not have a vision statement that was, let me remind you of what the criteria was, something, what you're focused on achieving in the next 3, 5 or more years. It's about becoming, what do we want to become in the future? Think what's possible, and something that would be eye-catching on a billboard on the highway as somebody's driving through town. So the group came up with imagine possibilities, discover potential, inspire the future. And that was also the #1 vote getter when the committee members had a chance to do a selection. I think in there, it's like 11 votes, if I remember correctly, on that one. So it's a popular, whereas I take that back. There were 9 votes for that one and then 4 for 4, 3, 3, and 2. So majority did vote for that one. Any comments on the vision statement?
We went with the largest group with the 9 votes as well. The only, I guess, big discussion we had was ING. Again, should it be
Mhm.
imagining, discovering,
inspiring.
and I guess one of the thoughts that were shared at that point was, if let's say we did put this on a billboard or some type of advertisement, we could say in there, imagining possibilities of Becker Public Schools or
Mhm.
discovering potential Becker Public Schools, you know, and to make it more,
Inspiring the future.
yeah. If we pulled out each of those individual little clauses.
I kind of like the idea of adding ing as a
Yes.
vision, yes, because that's what we're doing. I mean,
Action again.
yeah. Action in motion.
What I was gonna say is, if you just take the beginning words, right, and don't add the other words that are in between. So if it's just imagine, discover, inspire, that's where, to me, having the ing kind of would,
Bullshit.
well, I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know if it's the right words then, because then it feels like it's, if it's imagining, discovering, inspiring, does that say the same thing as imagine, discover, inspire? By that way. I don't know. This is, again, I don't think I have a feeling one way or the other on this one. Did you have something?
You know, I'll agree, I think, too, with Aaron. It's ing, it just gives it more of an action. And I think in Jeremy's, suggestion too, that you can use ing words, if you wanted to put it on a billboard, so.
She's gonna let us know when he joins, right?
Sure, yeah.
I just want to make sure Tori's not on.
Yeah, it looks like maybe, is Connie participating virtually at this point?
Neither one is on. Sounds like.
Okay, okay. There's a somewhat the last name. Oh, it's Summer. Okay,
Oh, right.
it's her computer. That's what I'm seeing right now. Okay.
Any other comments?
Okay.
Again, you guys wrote this, so did you have any discussions about things like that?
Yeah, we talked about that. And I think we were pretty split on that too. We weren't stuck to not putting the ing in there. I think we'd be fine with the group, at least we're fine with that.
The consensus then would be to add the ings on those.
I think so. It just gives you more opportunity to use the words.
Yeah.
Okay.
And any, and like you said, so. The good
Right.
words,
Mhm.
as well use them.
Okay.
Good. I like it. I like it. Good conversation on that one too. So then right underneath, you see the 5 strategic plan focus areas. So really, when we talk about a plan on a page, this could be kind of your executive summary, if you will. If you wanted to give somebody just a quick overview of your strategic plan, you could utilize this. And then as we go on to the next pages, you'll have your focus areas, the goals, and the objectives. And you did have a chance, and the committee had a chance to see these, talk about these at the 3rd strategic planning committee meeting. After that, I put together the notes that I had taken, and I know that your superintendent did as well. And so then the writing team went back and reflected or included those comments in the goals and the objectives, also added timelines as well. So that's what you're going to see on these pages. And with that, Superintendent Schmidt, maybe I'll turn it over to you for a minute. If there's anything that you specifically would like to call out on this for the board, kind of a compare and contrast to what they saw at the 3rd meeting.
Yeah, many of these are similar to what came up at the meeting. The adding the times, one of the discussions we had at the table when we were adding the timelines is just because we put 25, 26 or 27 or something like that in there. These were all things that we were continuing to do. The part that you can't see on here is we also created action items underneath many of these, especially the non-annual ones, where there was more doing, more like much more specific than these objectives here. So that's also in there. The I guess the rest of the discussion was mainly we cleared up some words and tweaked a little bit here and there, but didn't really change any of the major statements. We tried to focus on the information that obviously came from the 3 meetings, but we also brought into play some of the goals that we just went over on Monday, that we recapped and tried to blend those into here. Maybe not as specific. Maybe the finance one, I think, is the only one that's, well, that one's not, we changed that one a little bit too, but we try to incorporate some of the current goals that we didn't have set for this year, like the 2-3 year goals that we had talked about on Monday at Monday's meeting and here as well, as we were going through this. So yeah, I don't know if I'm missing anything else. I'm not gonna call it to the audience, but we spent a lot of time on these. I don't know how much, but over the 2 days, this was what we spent the bulk of the time on, I guess. So.
Well, that's that level of deep in the detail that goes in this obviously takes more time than the other pieces. And that's what you will spend the next 5 years more time on doing that. My only concern with these, and as they are laid out in the objectives, is that I'm not sure that there's measures that go along with each of these objectives. Where are we going to get to?
And I think that comes in with the action plan. So then
Okay.
the board setting this really high level view of where this goes, and then my goals, building goals, staff member goals and things like that will be part of the action plan, where they will be much more measurable. And again, they're not in here, but even looking at just objective number 1.1, all students are kindergarten ready, all students reading at grade level. When we do the world's best workforce plan, and that gets explained in around November during the board meeting, we break those down into much more specific things. And I think the one you maybe remember is all students graduating college and career ready. That was one where we didn't meet the district goal when I talked about it on Monday, but we met the world's best workforce goal on that because they're much more specific in those action steps, or the steps directly underneath
Yeah,
this.
so I mean, like there's 4 of them that right there that say all, which means that's 100%. And I think the question or the conversation around that is 100% actually achievable on some of these things? Because people move, we lose track of them, whatever happens, that it's not 100%.
Yeah.
And
I don't remember if we said it at the table here or if I said it in one of the admin meetings, but the state sets these legislative, I think it was at one of the strategic planning meetings, where we said, it doesn't look good if the state says 95% of students are kindergarten ready, or,
right.
No, I just want to go to that one, Jeremy. All students are kindergarten ready. First up, I don't know what kindergarten ready is. I'm not sure if anybody can put that into words. I'm not sure it exists. But the other thing is, how can we say all students? Because those that are homeschooled or those that don't participate in preschool are coming to kindergarten no matter what. I mean, we can have an impact on those that are in our buildings and in our ECFE in those programs, but how can we say all if we've never met the kid until they come to open house at kindergarten and be like, here I am? I mean,
yeah.
So that's just playing off Mark's question as far as all.
And I guess, does it have to specifically be kindergarten? would be another
These-
question.
these are
Is that-
listed-
That's how it's.
These are
laid out.
listed in, yeah, from statute.
Yeah, so these are, I really appreciate your discussion. You're not the first board that has had the same good questions. This is in statute. And we always want to make sure that we have world's best workforce as a placeholder in your strategic plan so that you know you are working towards that. And yeah, so it's a little bit non-negotiable, so to speak, with the wording of these.
But we can take the steps underneath there and
Mhm.
still set attainable goals and you know,
Well, and
achievable goals.
I mean, I've done a lot of this kind of goal setting and that kind of stuff. And what we often say is shoot for the stars, because then you know you're going to land above the trees.
Mhm.
You don't want to do is shoot too low. So, I mean, if you're shooting way up there, 100%, that is the goal. May not be achievable, but that's the goal to get to if we can. So we have to do everything we can to get there, knowing that we're going to land somewhere up close to that. Okay, so I get what you're saying. And because of the requirements for the legislative requirements, I don't think we have much of a choice other than that. That's what they're set at too.
Mhm.
But I mean, I go through each of these, Jeremy, and I guess my concern is if we as a board aren't, because I would see that all of these goals and objectives could go into our policy document. My concern is if there's nothing that I can look at that say, what are we measuring to know if we get there? I don't think we have to put the actual number in some of these, but there needs to be a measure there. I need to understand the connection to a measure. So that's again my feedback on these objectives. It needs to be that some sort of a measure.
Mhm. And I think those measures, as your superintendent mentioned before too, are really in the action steps. That's part of management. So as board members, you're going to get feedback throughout the year of how did we do with all students being kindergarten ready, and you're going to learn about the percentiles of how they were ready or not ready. Same with the reading at grade level by third grade. And with the objectives too, just in general, again, the specific steps, the activities, the measurements are going to be under those action plan considerations that management or superintendent will give leadership to. And then as a board, you'll always be getting updates on where you're at. Typically, you're going to be hearing about those things that are happening now. So things that are in the 2022, 2023 school year, boy, as a board member, you better be getting some feedback on them. Those would be the goals, the primary goals that your superintendent should be working on. And then the ones that are 2027, you probably aren't going to hear much about that particular goal or objective until you move into that time frame. Does that help clarify a little bit, or does that muddy the waters for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure that helps me a lot. So
Okay.
specifically,
Okay.
I look at objective 3.1.
Mhm.
It says during the school year, we will continue to utilize MTSS process to address academic and behavior needs through frequent and early intervention. To me, that's something that belongs in the actions. And I'm just looking through there of trying to find what is the measure.
Well,
Is it the kids falling behind? Is it what is it that you're trying to achieve by employing MTSS? Right? And I'm sorry, Aaron.
I was just gonna say, I think when you're setting goals for a system like we're doing here, those goals, I don't think have to be measurable. I think those are the guiding principles of this. This is what we're trying to do. Our goal is to make our students' lives better. And then from there, every situation underneath that has to look at that goal and say, okay, is what I'm doing helping the district to work towards what they want?
I will tell you that in my experience, if goals don't have a measure that I can see how I'm proceeding against that goal, then they get ignored.
Yes, personally, yes.
But we'll continue to, I mean, you might talk about that, that it has an adverse effect. How does it have an adverse effect? What's your measure to say that it's positive or negative? All of those types of things, that needs to be incorporated in there. I don't think we need to actually say what the number is in many of these cases. Again, to me, that would be actions. We could say, this is where we are. We want to improve that. What are the actions we're taking to improve that? I get that. But there needs to be something. What's the scale I'm on?
And I disagree. As a systems goal, I don't agree that that has to be a measure, because I think it'll be measured off of Jeremy and his core team underneath that. What's your measures? That's what we're gonna use as a board. We're gonna come here and say, okay, let's look at our goal. Did we do goal number one? You know, what do we have to show for that? And hopefully Jeremy and the principals are gonna say, here's what we did. Here's the information we have. Their goals are gonna stem from ours, and they're gonna have their measures underneath that.
And I would tell you, what did you do? Okay, so what was that impact? How much did we improve? You know, that's why I say I need a scale to measure that on, because how do you know that actually improved?
But you're talking about personal goals or goals for an office. We're talking about a systems goal here
Okay.
that I think it's different, because as a board, we don't have the direct impact to go in and do those measures or do those things. We direct it out.
Well,
So that therefore, I think when you see goals here at this board, it's the guiding principles. This is what we want to do. And then it filters down, and Jeremy and his team get to say, here's how we're going to do that. Here's our measures to say we've moved it or we haven't moved it.
I think it is too, because normally when you say goal, it's a visible target that you're aiming for. But in your sense, it's more of an idealism.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a different way that you look at how am I gonna, how am I looking at what does the goal mean, to me. So it's just a different way to look at what the goal is and what it means. Traditionally, it is a target that you aim for, which you can measure. So.
And then in this case, and I do appreciate the discussion, in this case, it is that bigger picture. Let me just move ahead here. Can you see the board governance model on the screen right now?
Yeah.
This is one of the other resources. So yeah, so as you think about this, the board is responsible for making sure that you have an up-to-date strategic plan. So at the top of the circle there, strategic plan, you've got the expectations and the parameters, and then you're going to adopt the policies, the budget, and the contracts that tie to that strategic plan. On the lower half of the circle, then it's the superintendent's responsibility to provide that leadership and supervision. So he will then develop the plans, the procedures, identify the staff needed to help carry those out. And then just going back, the context of when we talked about goals in this process, we talked about the goals flowing from the top, tying to the core values, the belief, the mission, and the vision. They describe the end point, the hoped for outcome. They're broad, they're long range. And then the objectives directly support, they enable those goals. So again, goals are broad, objectives are narrow. And so as you take a look at the governance model, the board in their governance role is responsible for the big picture. And then the superintendent does the more in the weeds management and always communication back and forth of where we are at on work with particular objectives. I don't know if that helps clarify or if that's going to muddy the water for you, but.
And we did, like I said, we had action steps that underneath these that are much more specific, measurable in some cases, and we'll continue to build those. If the board, we didn't get into all the way in the weeds for every single one of these, but we did for some, and just to show the steps we would take to get to this point or get to these objectives, and then to the goal.
Can you put that back up for a second, Gail?
Absolutely.
The other thing.
Can the governance model, can you see that? Okay.
Where I'm stuck a little bit is on the left-hand side as we're looking at it, the evaluate.
Yes. So
I'm-
evaluating, well, I'll let you talk and then I'll clarify. Sorry about that.
No, I think, because again, I just want to know what the scale is so that as I'm thinking about evaluation, I can say, you know, because I'm trying to think of the one goal that we talked about that we like, I think it was the coding, right? So the coding goal that we talked about, 6 hours. And it's like, if you got to 6 hours by December, you know, maybe we should have reset that goal to be that much higher. But then you're going to say, oh, that would have a negative impact on some of these other, you know, keep in mind, our focus is, you know, that they can read, that they can do math. And so coding is not one of those things. And so we don't want to take away from those other things. And that's exactly what I'm kind of trying to say here is that I'm worried that if we don't put a measure there, somebody's going to tell me that we're doing good in an area. And I'm going to go, well, wait a minute, but you know, the number of you know, truancies has gone up because we made this, you know, so hard that people don't want to come here anymore. And I'm kind of being facetious and a little extreme, but that's where I'm kind of going, is that we need to understand how to somewhat how to evaluate that. What's the scale we're using?
Yeah, and I think you're right on. I think using that 6 hours of coding example, if we're in the classroom or in the trenches here, that's not something we didn't, when we got December and we're like, we achieved that goal. The board, we didn't go back to the board and say, let's up that to 12 hours on January. But now that we can measure the things below these objectives here as action steps, we could take that 6 hours, if that was one of the action steps, and say, all right, how can we improve this? Or how can we, you know, whether it's just time or, all right, well, how meaningful was the 6 hours, and take it more into the weeds as the administrative
I think
staff.
the point is made, and I'll let you guys go with what you got on your actions. So thanks.
And I think too that with the term evaluate for the board, where we're going at with this one is the board evaluates themselves, just like you did taking the self-evaluation. You evaluate the superintendent and you evaluate based on the outcomes. I think Chair Swanson, where you're talking, maybe this will help clarify under that word develop. So the superintendent is going to develop the plans, procedures, and the staffing, but remember, there's going to be this communication back and forth. So at some point in time, your expectation as a board should be that your superintendent comes to you and says, we are now moving forward with our work on goal number 2, objective number 2.1. And here are some of the plans that I have in place of how we are going to accomplish that. And then he should be coming back to you and saying, you know, here we are. This is what's happened after 3 months, 6 months. So I think that's where you get that accountability that you're looking for. Does that help at all, or am I still muddying up the waters for you?
Go ahead. I'm okay.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So yes, I think as board members, don't let go of the accountability, but that's where that communication comes in between the board and the superintendent. Let's see, any other comments on any of the goals or the objectives, either Superintendent Schmidt or board members?
No, I think if you have time, and board members or anyone in the community too can, if you look through the, you know, the environmental scan, the surveys, and some of the data we had through strategic planning, and if you see something that we missed, I mean, we really tried to look at that when we were going through it. All the information we gathered to make sure we hit on as many of those as, or at least the larger ones as possible. That's what we really tried to do in this whole process.
And then I tried to do a cross check of everything as well to make sure that we weren't missing anything. And I think we've captured the findings, the suggestions, the recommendations of your committee in the goals and the objectives. And some of those action steps that your superintendent will be working on, I am pretty sure are some suggestions even that came out of the committee of, in their discussion as well. One of the other things that we will do now that you've had a chance to take a look at this is I will go back and put the objectives in chronological order. So anything that says annually will move to the top, unless Superintendent Schmidt says, nah, please don't do that. But usually we do. So anything that says annually we'll put at the top of the list, and then we'll put it in chronological order after that. And then I'll make the changes on the mission and vision that you asked for. And then this will come back to you again for another discussion at a subsequent, it can be a study session or a regular board meeting. Any other questions about the plan on a page? And if there's anything where you say, I don't like the looks of that, where this is set up here or there, I mean, you can give me that feedback too, because we will make those changes as well. Anything else on the plan on a page?
Okay, I think we're ready to move forward.
Okay, sounds good. Well, then I'm going to walk us through the other documents that were shared with you for this evening. And again, this is the opportunity to synthesize or link in this new strategic plan with your board self-evaluation that you took. And so a few of the resources that I'm sharing is, first of all, I want to talk about the stages of board development. And I think this is really significant in your case because you are in a transition period, bringing on a couple new board members. And so think about where you are at with welcoming the new board members and on these stages. The stages start with forming, storming, norming, performing, and then deforming. And because this is a copyright, I can't change that word, but I like the word reforming even better. So as you're forming that new team, it's really a time of orientation. There's a lot of uncertainty. There might be some anxiety on the part of ongoing board members and certainly those that are joining the team. This might be a time where you get lots of questions. How do we do this? Why do we do this? What happens if we don't do this? Just a lot of questioning, and sometimes as a board, you may have to go slow to go fast. And sometimes Chairman Swanson, that falls on your shoulders of helping to answer some of those questions and knowing that in the end, it's good to take that time to answer the questions, be clear, and that will help you go just that much faster as you move ahead. Then usually we see a board transition into a storming stage. It's kind of that, again, that anxiety is still there. It's that reality of the role, the weight of the responsibility. Sometimes there can be disagreements. Sometimes there can be an us versus them. It's kind of like the growing pains, if you will, with the storming. And I remember going through that when I was on the board as well. And then the board will start to transition into what we call the norming phase, where you go from me to we. And that's when the group starts to fall into much more agreement. There's much more comfort. It doesn't mean that you're going to have consensus all the time, but you're going to have constructive conversations and discussion at board meetings. And then the next stage is performing. So that's that level of high productivity, and there's a lot of confidence in your work. The commitment from board members is high, minimal conflict, the goals are clear. And that's why I think the timing with your new strategic plan is so helpful, because all of you pretty much have had the opportunity to participate in some or all pieces of the strategic planning process. And now this is what's going to guide you in the next 3 to 5 years. So you've got that piece to help you. And then the last stage is the deforming or the reforming. And deforming means that there's a termination and ending. You're saying farewell to somebody, members of your board superintendent team, and then that transition to the forming. So as you think about these stages, any comments about that? Do you see yourselves right now in a particular stage? Any concerns about those stages as you transition through them? And know that you can be in a performing stage, and then something might come to the board table where it feels like you're going a little backwards into the storming or the norming stage, and that's very, very normal. But for the most part, your goal is to want to move yourself to that high performing category.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'll say about this,
Sure.
from historical things, you go through your first term, the first 4 years, and there's a couple of guys on the board that basically got thrown into this in the last, and just to learn the terminology, understand some of the pieces behind it, takes a lot of effort and reading and understanding. So I mean, it's hard to go through all of these phases in a short period of time. It does take some time to go through it, and it's normal. So as we come through the end, the rest of this year, we have some opportunities to continue to work things forward, but know that we probably still are, at least in that storming phase of just, I don't understand. You got to explain this to me. I'm not sure I agree with you. All of those types of things, it's hard to get through that. So, and that's normal, and we'll get through it.
And just in my 3.5 years of being on the board, looking at those terminologies of all 5 of those, I can honestly say I've felt all 5 of them.
Yep.
Several times and on a regular basis. So, yeah, I mean, I would say, and a lot of times it isn't just one stage, you are feeling multiple at any given time.
Oh, now we're talking about bonding. Oh, now we're talking about levy. Oh, now we're talking about, policy.
Contracts, negotiations. Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate the comments on that, because that's exactly how I felt as a board member too. And you think things are going along relatively smooth, and then, something will come up. And again, it doesn't mean that you're not going to work together as a team, but it takes that time. And usually at MSBA, we say it takes at least 3 years to have a touch point with everything that you'll likely see in the world of being a school board member. So patience, more patience on the part of everybody, actually, and be open to the questions of the new board members, and new board members be patient with those who have to find the answers or get the answers for you. Okay. With that, another document that I wanted to share, and we did talk about the board governance model before, so I think you have a good understanding of that, what the board's role is as far as governance, and then the superintendent's role is to provide the leadership, the supervision. And again, the most important thing here is what you see in the center is student achievement for all. And then school district goal alignment is something that you'll be operating under with your new strategic plan. So district goals in the red box are basically the goals of your new strategic plan. And those goals then will link to your superintendent's goals, your staff goals, and your student goals. Again, student achievement for all is at the very top.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll say about the strategic piece of this, I mean, often if you don't have the alignment, if you have people going different directions, different priorities, all of that kind of stuff, you can see how the effort has to be that much bigger in order to actually move forward. Whereas if everybody's strategically moving in the same direction, you have the same vision, the same mission, that same direction, you get the synergies of people working together to make that achievement rather than people going in a bunch of different directions. So that's really the strategic part of this and strategic alignment.
And I think the fact that you included all stakeholders in this process, again, it should be a reason for everybody to grasp your new strategic plan and know that it does speak on behalf of all of the stakeholders.
And often organizations talk about getting buy-in from the stakeholders, involving them in the process and everybody understanding to move together. That buy-in comes more naturally. They're involved in it.
Absolutely. I think it will serve you well in the months and years ahead. So that kind of sets the tone now for the self-evaluation. And I want to just quickly review the standards of board leadership. And I'll tell you how these tie to the self-evaluation. And these are shared at phase 1 for brand new board members. And we also share this at phase 3, the high performing school board team. So standard number 1 is conduct and ethics. And it is how you as a board superintendent team work together, communicate with one another, trust one another, respect one another, support one another, even when you don't necessarily agree. So conduct and ethics. Standard number 2 is vision. And vision is really what you have just created for your school district with your new strategic plan. So you've got the focused, attainable, measurable goals and outcomes. And you've got your strategic plan with your belief statement, your mission and your vision, your goals and objectives. And then you'll be regularly monitoring that strategic plan and communicating your progress. You'll have that communication from your superintendent, and then you'll be able to communicate that to the community, the progress to the community as well. The third standard is structure, and structure ties to the physical and the organizational structures for student and staff success. So the physical structures are just that. It's your buildings, the indoor and the outdoor spaces. The organizational structures are staff and curriculum and technology that are in place for the school district. And then standard number 4 is accountability, monitoring the conditions for the entire school district. So making sure that accountability by number 1, having a superintendent in place and working as a team with the superintendent, using student achievement data to help improve student achievement throughout. And then the 5th standard is advocacy and communication. And this is telling the story of what's happening in the Becker School. And actually with advocacy and communication, you've tied that in as one of your focus areas in the strategic plan. So you'll notice that under each of these 5 standards, there are benchmarks, letters A through E, A through D, A through F, A through H, and A through E. So the reason I wanted to just review these is because the benchmarks were the questions on that board self-evaluation that you took. So as we take the dive now into the self-evaluation, you'll see the connection to those standards and how this just ties everything together for you. Any questions or comments about the standards? Okay. Then I am going to transition to take a look at your full report, the self-evaluation, and a couple of comments regarding this. First of all, there was no right or wrong answer. There was no pass or fail on this, and there was no grading, no letter grade for your responses. It really looked at each of the benchmarks and how you responded to them in terms of if it's something that you always do most of the time, some of the time, never, or don't know. And so the takeaway with this assessment is more about patting yourselves on the back and congratulating yourselves on the positive things that you are already doing. And then, of course, we use it as an opportunity, just like a self-assessment that I would have done on myself, where, you know, there's things that I'm doing really well, but there's things that my employer says, hey, I'd really like you to work on this. And there's things that I might say, you know, I'd really like to work on this as well. So this is where the opportunity comes in for you as a board superintendent team. This evaluation is longitudinal. So when you saw on the first page, it said 2022, MSBA encourages you to take this self-evaluation on an annual basis. You can take it and you can have me or another staff person come back and walk you through it. Or once you've had a chance to walk through this evening, you will be probably just comfortable taking it again and then getting the results, and you can take a look at it on your own at a work or a study session. So the longitudinal part comes in that if you take it every year, you're going to see your results from this year and next year and the following year. So you can start to see the trends in your work as a board superintendent team as well. And that's one of the things that I really like about this. We did not have something like this when I was on the board, and I wish that we had. I think it would have helped us improve in the work that we did. So what you see on this page, and this is considered to be page number 4, even though the first 4 pages aren't numbered, but this is what I call the one-page overview report. And so down the left-hand side, you have the 5 standards with a quick summary of what they reflect. Across the top, you've got the response options that you had in those 70-some questions. And then the horizontal bar graphs give you a percentage of the responses based on each of the standards. So as you look at this, and the first thing that I always look at for any school district is this overview report, just to get an idea of the responses of always and most of the time. A benchmark that is not research-based. This is a benchmark more that I have identified in working with many, many school districts on this over the past few years. Is a benchmark is if you have a percentage of always and most of the time that is at least 50%. It just seems like you're really moving towards that high-performing board. And in your case, that has really happened in almost every category. So with conduct and ethics, you are at 60%, vision 66%, structure 57%, accountability 52%, and advocacy and communication 46%. And of course, that's one of the areas that you'll be working on within your strategic plan. So my guess is that your responses are going to look very differently if you take this in another year. The question for you, oh, go ahead.
Just one question. I kind of skimmed a little bit forward, and I'm probably going to answer my own question, but I saw 7 responses. Does Jeremy, how do we, so the 6 board members plus Jeremy.
Board superintendent. Yep. Good catch. Good catch on that. Yep. Very good. The question with the yellow or the sum of the time is, how do we move the sum of the time into the always or most of the time? If the responses are never, we're going to take a look at those where the responses were never. And does that mean you never do it? Or maybe the question was worded in a way that you don't think you ever do it, or maybe it's something you don't need to be doing. And then and certainly we want to change the never responses into something else in the years ahead. And then don't know, simply don't know. And that could be a reflection from a new or newer board members where they just haven't been on the board long enough to know the answers. And again, in another year, those questions will be answered. And so usually with the nevers or the don't knows, these are the more the opportunities, if you will, of helping to inform board members of whichever questions those are. And we're going to take a look at those in just a second. Now, you'll also notice that the overview report is reported in percentages. And we do that intentionally. We need, because the benchmarks the number of benchmarks varied. Remember, it was A through E, A through H, A through F. So because they varied, we want to give you an apples to apples picture of each of these categories. So we needed to calculate these in percentages. When we move to this individual questions, then you're going to see the number of responses. So this is the overview report. Anybody have any questions or comments? Anything I can clarify for you? And we can always go back if there's something you think of or if I'm moving too fast. So what we're going to see in the next pages are each of the questions that you responded to. They're always going to be identified by the standard number 1, conduct and ethics. And then here you'll get to see the benchmark that was reflected in these 2 questions. And so for your responses here, question 3 and 4, you can see that the majority said always and most of the time. And for those kinds of responses, you know, there's probably not a talking point. These are the ones where you kind of say, hey, we're on track with this benchmark. And then as I shift to some of the next pages, looking here, your responses start to have a little bit more color, so to speak, in them. In question number 5, providing information to the public that supports board discussions and decisions. And one of the things that you talked about in your strategic plan was communication. And I think that's something that you'll likely be working on. And pull your strategic plan back again. So I have it in front of me. But the family and community engagement, I should say, with communication there. So, and the communication plan, I think that's objective number 5.1. So you do have a plan in place for making sure that that information is provided to the public. Question 7 talks about carrying out the annual assessment, and that's what you are doing this evening, or that's what you have done by taking the school board self-evaluation. And hopefully you'll do that on an annual basis, some type of a self-assessment, and your responses for this question will look very different. And question number 8 talks about goals for improvement. That's the other thing that we will be discussing this evening. So I'm going to be taking notes along the way, and I've actually written some notes for you after reviewing your summary of things that you may want to talk about. So you'll have an opportunity to talk about some internal goals that you may work on, maybe 1 or 2 over the next year. Questions or comments? Okay. These questions, number 11 is one that I always like to visit with boards about, talks about written protocols. And what MSBA is suggesting is that you as a board have some written protocols. This would be something that would complement your code of ethics that you have. And the written protocols might be how you communicate, who communicates to the superintendent, how do board members communicate back and forth, how does the chair communicate with board members. It could be emails. How do you handle emails? Does the chair respond to all the emails? Do individual board members respond to emails or calls or questions or texts from constituents? Who's authorized to contact legal counsel on the board? How do you address board members during a meeting? Is it Director Gilman? Is it Board Chair Swanson, Superintendent Schmidt? Or is there some other way that you address one another? How are committees set up? Does the chair set up the committees on an annual basis? Or do you all have an opportunity to say, well, I'd like to serve on this committee? Or do you serve on the committee until you're not wanting to serve on it anymore and somebody else fills in? So those are some of the things that you would probably include in your protocols. With that said, I'm curious, do you have any written protocols at this point? I'll start with Chair Swanson. With your experience over the years.
Yeah, we have some, and we've visited some in this last year even, so.
Okay. All right. So you may want to consider, if you don't have them written down, make sure that you do have them written down. Two reasons for that. One, when you bring a new team member, whether it's superintendent or a board member, when you have new team members, it's good to be able to share that with them so they know what those protocols are. And then for some boards, if you've got a board member who's starting to kind of stray away a little bit from one of the protocols, it's a good tool for the board chair or other board members to use and help kind of reeling them back in again.
Okay.
Curiosity question, Gil, you
Mhm.
talked about the color, our colors were good and then you saw they got more colorful. In your experience, is there any color that draws attention, or are we similar to a lot of boards? Or, I mean, I know every board is unique. I'm not denying that because every district is unique, but did you see a lot of similarities, some areas of concern?
That's a really good question. Every board is obviously different. There are some patterns that I seem to see. That question 7 and 8 about doing an annual assessment and setting goals seems to be one that is kind of right out there with almost every board that I work with, unless it's a board who annually does a self-assessment. I actually have several school districts around the state where I meet with them on an annual basis. And so, after about the 4th time, their responses for questions 7 and 8 are very different. They're all always. And this question 11 is one that many times comes up as well. So there are some that definitely, as we move forward too, there'll be a few others that'll come up. There's one about budget that comes up, one about parent or community engagement that comes up with just about every school that I work with. And I think for you as a board, again, the goal is to move towards the always or most of the time. And again, if there's a lot of nevers or don't knows, those are opportunities to clarify and help educate the board at a study session. Question 12, I will just comment that if you're using the MSBA model policies, which I know that you are, then you really are governing using policies that are based on research-based best practices. So our policies come to you basically after the legislative session for sure. My colleague Terry Morrow and my colleagues Denise Dietrich and Kim Lewis are monitoring those. So as soon as there's legislative action, state or federal for that matter, that will impact your school district, then we create a model policy. And before we send that out to you, we actually have our own legal counsel review it too. So it goes to that next step. So you can be assured that policies are aligned with research. And, I should mention with policies, now, one of the things that I know Chair Swanson mentioned last time, and I heard you mention it this evening, I am not aware of many schools that have their strategic plan as a policy. So you might want to think about that. What more so what happens is a school district will have a policy that ties to the requirement of having a strategic plan that includes goals and objectives or something like that. It's a little bit more generic. And that might be something you want to consider, because if you do any changes on your strategic plan, if dates gets changed, or after you do an annual review, you decide to add an objective, you're always going to be going back and needing to make a change on that policy. So I'm going to toss that out. Thoughts on that one? Is that a surprise to you? Or maybe there's a backstory that I'm not aware of with that one.
Well, I think the only backstory that I can recall when we put that into place, because obviously there's no model MSBA for doing it that way. Again, we wanted to have something that can be promulgated. All of our policies are posted in the same spot. And it was something that we took on as a board. And so that's why we put it, the board sets policies, policy governance, all of those things that we kind of outlined in policy. So that's why it was created as a policy.
Okay, okay. So,
That's the only background. I mean,
Okay.
and I don't know if and that was my recollection, is that the board sets policies, and so that's why we made it a policy.
use that as that. Okay, sounds good. So I just wanted to toss that out because I was surprised. And actually, I think at the start of the strategic planning process, your superintendent sent me the policy and I'm like, this is different. But anyway, not necessarily a bad thing, but I just wanted to share that with you. So you would really have the option that you could keep that policy. You might not want to, and you may not want to embed the entire strategic plan as it is in there. And maybe you do, but I'll leave that up to you for discussion.
Okay.
The question 14 is one that I always like to talk about with most schools as well. You actually have a lot of opportunities to collaborate, and sometimes more than you are thinking about. Certainly phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 are opportunities where board members can collaborate. MSBA Summer Seminar, which is coming up on August 4th, I believe, our leadership conference, the MSBA Coffee and Conversations, our third Thursday webinars, negotiation seminars, advocacy tour and delegate assembly, and then the Friday chats during the legislative session. So there's a lot of things that MSBA has built in for you to collaborate above and beyond the things that you are possibly doing as well. Our director district meetings, and I'm not sure if you have had one yet or not, but our MSBA directors are going to be more intentional about having, I think they're going to be virtual meetings. There's a couple, I think there was one that was held in the Shakopee area just today, I think. So you've got those opportunities as well. I don't know, have any of you, some of you have participated on the Coffee and Conversations before, I think, haven't you? I think I've seen some of you on.
I have.
I've been there, but
Okay. Yeah, so you know that there's opportunities to bring up agenda items, kind of the hot topics, the 2 or 3 hot topics of that particular day, and then board members help solve problems and share ideas. Okay. We're still under conduct and ethics, and let's see, continuous question 16. So I really think that you have built that continuous improvement into your new strategic plan. Let's see, the trust, working with your superintendent. So I'm going to keep scrolling. That brings us to the end of the conduct and ethics. Was there anything in there that anybody wants to comment on or go back to?
I do want to check with the board. Back to number 14, which you don't have to rewind or anything, but those opportunities that Gail just listed, do all of you get the MSBA, like weekly updates and the emails and things? How about
I don't get that, but I just actually went through
from Wednesday?
the phase 1 training and I have signed up, so
Okay.
I should start getting that sent to me on a regular basis now.
And Troy too should be.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I don't forward those on to you unless there's parts of them that are on there that I think it's good to look at if it may be. So, all right, that's what I want to check out.
That's a good comment. Yeah, if you're feeling like you're not getting those, just let us know and we'll double check on there. But they are also, the publications are also on our website too. But I particularly like the daily e-clippings. To me, that's my quick environmental scan of what's going on around the state and sometimes in the country as well on related to education. Okay. Standard number 2 is vision. And you just got done creating those goals and expectations. And your responses here are all pretty cohesive in how you feel about that. Question 25 talks about including stakeholders. And that's exactly what you just did in creating your vision when you were developing your strategic plan. And then communicating rationale for decisions. And again, with this one, I think you will be more intentional about how you do communicate your decisions to the community based on the work of your new strategic plan. Questions 27, 28, and 29. This is all about your new strat plan. And you did just formulate it with community members. And now you'll have some policies perhaps that will need to be developed or relate to the work of the new strategic plan. Certainly there'll be some decision-making and some budgeting, some resources that will need to be targeted towards some of those new district goals. And then 29, continually monitoring the progress. And this is where we talked earlier about that communication between the board and the superintendent. So as there are objectives that are being worked on, you're going to be expecting that your superintendent will be giving you updates on progress so that you know where things are at. And then at minimum, you'll want to do a deeper dive on an annual basis of that new strategic plan. With these questions, student achievement is tied into your new strategic plan. So you have that addressed under the student growth and achievement. And that is vision. Any questions in general about vision? Anything that you need clarification on?
I always wonder, like question 31, where it talks about the superintendent review, together with the superintendent review regularly. You know, when we go across the whole spectrum there, from always to never, and I think I wonder sometimes if we, to me, one side or the other is missing the point, or missing what we're doing. When we go across the whole spectrum. And so that to me is, again, some opportunities for us to make sure that we're clear on how are we doing that, or how are we not doing that. So that's what I take from, that kind of a response. So
I would agree with you on that. And again, the some of the times could possibly have come, I don't want to stereotype or categorize anybody, but it could possibly have come from a new or a newer board member. And so that might look differently in another year. I also think where you get these that are on the spectrum like that as well, it might be a message to your superintendent to say, to be more intentional about, this is an example of us reviewing student achievement, those kinds of conversations, that kind of verbiage, so that everybody is clear on that. But yeah, you do have a few that are like that, and it might just be indicative of the newer board members. Okay.
or
So
more
it's
of the older board members that maybe it's something.
well, that's just
or something like that.
I know it could be. And again, I shouldn't stereotype at all, but it is, I think the messaging behind that is probably for superintendent to be intentional about saying, we are going to review student achievement, or we're going to, monitor, whatever the terminology needs to be, so that board members are clear what they're doing. Then we're moving into the structure, the organizational and physical structure. This is one of the questions that for when you asked earlier about, are there some that I see a lot within school districts? This is another set of questions that often looks just like this, very colorful. Matter of fact, when I was on the board, I was probably one of those that said, don't know or never too, if I would have been taking this. So the messaging here, this talks about your staff, and it talks about hiring and retention in question 34. It talks about evaluating staff in question 35, and it talks about staff development in question 36. The takeaway for you as board members is to know that the responsibility of each of those three questions is the superintendent's. For board members, you are responsible for ensuring that that is happening. So as an example, if you don't know about the hiring or the retention policies, I think that would be a great topic at one of your study sessions to ask your superintendent to take some time just to review what happens. Same with evaluation of staff. As a professional, I was always just curious. I knew how I was evaluated in my world of work when I was on staff at university at the U of M, but I wasn't real clear about what that looked like for staff, for administrators. I knew that my responsibility as a board member was to evaluate the superintendent, and that was the only person we evaluated. And I wasn't always sure about staff development. So for me, it was just helpful for the superintendent to sit down and say, this is our process. Obviously, I wasn't going to learn about a particular staff person's evaluation, nor would I have access to their file, be it, not wanting to interfere with data privacy, but just knowing the process. And same then with staff development. And I believe that you probably have a policy, I think it might be in the 600s, that ties to staff development. So again, this category of questions might be something that you want to just talk about at one of your study sessions. I'm going to pause for a second. Thoughts on that one? Comments?
I would say too, the strategic plan has under goal number 4 has many of these pieces. Like even 4.1 is we'll create and implement a plan to recruit and retain high quality staff or highly qualified staff. Provide feedback to staff on professional growth, teacher development and evaluation plan. So like you've alluded to on some of the other ones, it is something we have written down now.
So you really will have that built in, I think, with getting that feedback. And if there's some more of the specifics, kind of the nuts and bolts that you want to learn about without going in too deep, I think that is fair game.
I think what you said earlier, Gail, about, we might have a better understanding of when it comes to evaluating the superintendent, hiring a superintendent, all that kind of stuff. But as we get down to the staff, I think being a policy governance board, it's hard to get sometimes involved in those details. But having said that, I think this is where we have the opportunities to understand and clarify policies on those things. So, as we work through policies and clarifying what the expectations are for high performing staff, I think that's where we'll, see some improvements for this, is kind of what I'm thinking. So,
yeah,
because I think we've had at least some discussions that our policies might not be as clear as they could be on what the expectations are for some of our staff members. That's where, at least thinking about these questions and how I might have answered them was some of the thoughts there.
Good feedback on that. Anybody else want to comment? Okay. We'll keep us moving along here under structure. Here we're talking about curriculum, technology, quality facilities, the learning essentials. And you've got a few don't knows. I believe that these questions are reflected in your strategic plan under your student growth and achievement. So I think that you will be taking a closer look at these as the year unfolds. Updating technology and the long-term facilities maintenance plan or long-term facilities plan. Again, with both of these, ultimately, the responsibility for making sure that these are happening is the superintendent's. But as board members, you want to ensure that that's happening. When I was on the board, usually these were a couple of things that came up in the summer months because summers were a little bit slower for us. So we talked a little bit more about technology, and we talked more about facilities in general. So I think, again, the action for those, the superintendent will oversee, or he'll delegate to staff members, but board members need to know about those as well. and be informed. This talks about management, an effective, efficient learning environment. And again, I think this ties into your strategic plan with the student growth and achievement.
And this was one that stuck out to me because when we talk about the classroom and the learning environment, that we have some, we've talked about that. That was our kind of the number one thing that kept coming back was that safe environment, and what's there. And so this, I think, reflects that as well.
Reflected in your beliefs and reflected in some of those goals and objectives that you were looking at earlier too. Okay. Here we talk about the budget that provides the resources for your goals and your priorities. And here, question 46, we've got a never on this one, keeping the community informed about the district's financial status. I think we actually talked about that from the surveys, where you and pretty much every other school district that I work with on the external survey, you get this, what I think could be perceived as negative feedback about managing the finances of the district, when in essence, it's more about just making sure that the community is informed about the financial status. Seeking public input during the budget process. This is another one of those questions that with just about every single school district that I work with, even those that I worked with over multiple years, the responses kind of look like years. So I think with this one, it's about being intentional in getting the public's input above and beyond your public hearing that you have. And it could even be creating a stakeholder committee of community members where you just help them understand the budgeting process, not because they're going to make decisions or be at the board table with you, but have them understand so that they can help answer and be spokespersons for you in the community as well. Any comments or thoughts on any of those questions?
I mean, school finance is kind of having to understand some of the different buckets and stuff like that. And just the basics between operational levy versus, bond referendum. It's difficult to understand, or it explained to some people. We might get hit for, spending money on an entrance to the building. And they're like, well, but you don't have programs for, I don't know, you could improve your school readiness programs. No, those are two different buckets. Can't spend the money over there. They explain that to people. Sometimes it takes some time and patience and those types of things. So, those types of things.
I'll just say I'm kind of surprised at number 46, especially over the last year and a half, 2 years. I thought we've talked a lot about our financial situation and where we're going and what our plans are, so
Here.
yeah. So I mean, but when we were getting ready for the referendum and everything, all the information that was out there, all this, I mean, we just came off of a whole year preparing for a referendum, and I think we did a great job of informing people of the district's finances and where we are and where we're going. I mean, so to see a never on there is kind of like, that blew my mind.
Well, and but I'd say also, I mean, COVID put some muddiness to that. It would be, to me, a difficult thing to sit down with a bunch of people and help them understand how we went from 3% to 8% with one-time money from COVID because of a lot of the work that we were doing before COVID and spending our money in those areas. We didn't have to spend money on buying iPads where a lot of other districts did. So that was in being able to shift money around and doing some of that work. So, I mean, again, understanding school finance and how the money moves is not an easy thing to explain. And so many people will, if you can't explain it to me, then you're not doing a good job communicating. So that's what I would say to
That's
that.
true.
Ryan, you were gonna.
I was just gonna say, just in the last couple years, we did one thing that we hadn't done in years past, and that was put a finance committee in place on top of that. And then to piggyback off of the COVID, I mean, we had Jeremy talking Esser for 18 months, and the difficulties and the frustrations and all of that. Had we gotten what was truly should have been ours, there was that argument, and then having to say, well, we should have got that, but because of these statutes and how they funded, we only got a sliver of it versus the whole piece of the pie.
It sounds like you have been doing some things. If you had a finance committee and the messaging, and you've got it built into your strategic plan under the effective resource management. So I would just encourage you to think of ways that you can keep telling the story about the buckets. As I've been taking notes, one of the things that I'll do is a summary of the things we've talked about. And when I share that, I'll send it to the superintendent and to the board chair, but and then you can share it with the rest of the board. But one of the things that I will include in there is a link to the school business officials, and maybe you've already seen it. It's maybe a 5-minute little video clip that's used that talks about the pots of money that I think could maybe be linked to your website even, for community members, or you could refer them to that too, and it helps tell that story. Okay, under accountability, this next set of questions talks about accountability with your strategic plan and student achievement. And so timely review. So again, you're going to have those ongoing updates that your superintendent will provide. I would be intentional about doing an annual, a little bit deeper dive review of your strategic plan, where you, after having completed that, maybe do a summary and send it out to your strategic planning committee members. So as you're approving the strat plan, I would hope and encourage that you would send that out to all of your strategic planning committee members. And then when you do your annual review, your deeper dive, share an update with them as well, and just say, here's progress that has been made on objective 2.1 as part of whatever that topic might be. And then as far as the strategic plan and school improvement, that's basically what you're all about with your strategic plan. And we've already talked about the annual review and make recommendations as well. Okay, under accountability, superintendent. So we talked earlier, the one and only person that you as board members hire and evaluate is your superintendent. All the other staff are hired and evaluated. That's the responsibility of your superintendent to take the lead on that. And so it's important that you have written goals for your superintendent. Now that you have your new strategic plan, MSBA would strongly encourage you to align the goals for your superintendent with those in that strategic plan. So looking primarily at the things that are in there for the 22-23 school year. MSBA also recommends that you have at least 1 and no more than 3 goals for your superintendent, and that you do an annual review, and that you use a tool. Now, one of the tools that hopefully you can see this is the goals and standards-based superintendent evaluation. This is a tool that was created by School Boards Association and Association of School Administrators. And this is also on our website. And so that is a tool that you could use to evaluate your superintendent. But I'm going to pause for a second and ask Chair Swanson, what is the procedure for superintendent evaluation in your district?
We don't, that's one of those things where we don't have anything clear
Okay.
about it. I think, one of the things I'll say in the last several months, talking about, creating some plans around things like the communication plan, some other pieces
Mhm.
that we've asked the superintendent to look closer at and start evaluating, how we've moved on, just creating that written plan,
Mhm.
how things are going to be done with regard to policies and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
We don't have anything else that's clear. We've varied over the years, even who we get input from.
Mhm.
As far as for the superintendent, is it just a board thing, or should it be, at least the direct report? Should we ask some of the other staff members to give us input on the superintendent? And I think actually these answers that are
Mhm.
on here reflect that we aren't real clear on how we evaluate the superintendent.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I think the timing is perfect with your new strategic plan. So you owe it to your superintendent to do an annual review, at least annually. When you've got a brand new superintendent, you might do a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, whatever, but you owe it to your superintendent to do that. That is the one time that you can go into closed session with your superintendent to discuss performance, review progress on the goals from the past year, and then talk about goals for the next year. MSBA strongly encourages that it is only the board that evaluates the superintendent. We do not recommend a 360. We do not recommend feedback from direct reports, any other staff. You've got your strategic plan in place, so you could identify goals. Again, pick out the goals that are in the 22-23 school year and have those as the priorities for your superintendent. And usually, and that tool that I just shared is very, very helpful. That gives you some ranges of how you rank, has met or exceeded or not met expectations. So that tool, I think, would be really helpful. If at some point you want to have a conversation with me to get you started on that, otherwise my colleague Barb Dorn, who works with leadership development, excellent resource. She also has a webinar that she did on superintendent evaluation that I could also share that link with you if you'd like to just take a look at it. I think Barb's going to do it again, maybe in the fall, but she's got the recording from last year's and you could take a look at that. Time of year depends upon what works best for you. When I was on the school board, we did our evaluation during the summer months, again, because it just seemed to be a little more quiet for us and it just seemed to be the right time. Some schools do school year, some do calendar year, some do a fiscal year. So it doesn't really matter the timing as much as just do it. And now you're set up with your strategic plan, so you really can identify what those goals are. And anybody else would like to comment?
So
on
let me just say some more words on that. So we've had a couple of closed sessions recently, I think at least 2 in the last 4 months, to give the superintendent some feedback on performance and at least perceived issues that we had. The other thing that I would say, and I don't know if I put words in Jeremy's mouth, but I mean, our strategic plan, the goals, the objectives that were existing prior to us going through this process, Jeremy inherited a bunch of those and didn't have the opportunity to really get input for us to relook at them, see if they're all still valid. I think, going through COVID kind of threw a wrench in the whole thing. We had some goals and objectives that suffered because of that. And I think this was the right timing to get everything refreshed so that the board could evaluate legitimately evaluate Jeremy based on, what we've set for a strategic plan and the goals and objectives. I don't know if that was some of the driver of getting Gail involved with this, at this timing. Like I said, I'm putting some words in your mouth maybe, but that was my feeling, is that we needed to have this so that we could do a better job evaluating what Jeremy's doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are lots of reasons why we got this involved, but first, I've been evaluated the last 2 years. I don't know what you did before that, but yeah, so we have done evaluations and things with that related to goals that were set up. And so, like Mark said, some of them were set up before I was here even, but I think part of it was, yeah, just to make sure we get on a better path where we've got
Mhm.
some strategic alignment where we can create those goals and use those to evaluate me anyway, and I can use those to evaluate other staff. So.
Anybody else? Everybody's shaking their head, Gail. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I think you're well on your way with this. I think the timing was just perfect. And I would agree with you too. There's some wacky things that came in here with pandemic and inherited goals and things like that you kind of work through them and then move on here. So I think these are the last set of questions under accountability. This is all about student academic progress. And this is again tied into your focus area of student growth and achievement. And the bottom line here talks about monitoring data and things like that. I think ultimately as a board, you want to get to that big picture of obsessing on results in a very positive way, results where students are achieving and performing at a very high level, and putting those supports in place that they need for student achievement. And again, you're being accountable to yourselves, to your stakeholders, by having those included in your strategic plan. So that was the section of accountability. Anything in there that you wanted to go back to? Okay. The last standard is advocacy and communication. And question 62, again, is one of those that with just about every district I always comment on. With MSBA, you really have the advocacy built in to your world as board members through our government relations team. We've got our advocacy tour, which will be happening in the fall. I think they're already working on dates for that. We've got the delegate assembly. We've got the Friday chats that happen during the legislative session, and the weekly advocate, which is an email that comes out during the legislative session. So you really have MSBA working on your behalf in a very, very, very grassroots way. So whatever you do above and beyond that will really complement what MSBA is doing on your behalf. And I know your chair has been on delegate assembly for how long? For a number of years, right?
I think it's been 10 years. So
He's seasoned at that, so he's seen it firsthand. Excuse me. Question 63, using the cultural, racial, ethnic lens. And we really talked about that within the strategic plan as well, to embed diversity, equity, inclusion into the strategic plan. And I think you did a nice job with that as well. Question 65 talks about how you respond to questions, concerns, comments, feedback. We touched on this a little bit with those written protocols, but I'm curious, what is your protocol if a board member or all board members get an email from somebody? Who responds to those? How are those handled?
goes to the superintendent.
Okay, and the superintendent responds?
Correct.
Okay, and that's pretty much how it happens with everybody, and emails, phone calls?
Generally, that's true.
Okay.
I would say, even somebody that comes up to you face to face or comes up to me face to face, I will talk to them and listen. And that information then goes to Jeremy for, resolution, especially if
Mhm.
I don't have any idea what the answer is, if it's not just what the board is doing, but rather what's happening at the school. And often we direct them back to, well, have you talked to the teacher? Have you talked to
Okay.
the principal? Basically pushing back to that, saying, make sure that you follow a process to be able to get those issues resolved. That the board, hopefully the board is not getting involved at those level of details, but push it
Mhm.
back to the right person. And
Yeah.
maybe Jeremy knows about that to push it to the right person.
Okay.
Yeah, utilize the chain of command.
Mhm.
I mean, what the topic is. I'm sure you guys have conversations with people, just general discussions and things like that, but yeah, if there's a problem that shouldn't be solved by you guys, it should be solved by
Mhm.
me and my team.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would agree with what I've heard you say. I think the key is if you are being contacted, whether it is an email or a text or a phone call in person, I think you can initially respond in a polite way. Gail, thank you for contacting me. We do have a process in place, and I'm going to refer you to our superintendent, or I'm going to refer you to the chain of command. And so in that case, you would talk to the high school principal or something like that. So I think our role is to listen, but not fix, because as an individual board member, we can't really, there's really nothing we can fix. Your power is at the board table when you come together. So you are one of 6 or one of 7. But I do think being kind to those that reach out to you. And I think if a lot of schools, if you get an email, if I emailed you, I'm one of your stakeholders, then to respond back, Gail, thank you for your message. I'm going to CC our superintendent, Jeremy Schmidt, on this reply, and he'll get back to you. So at least they know they've heard from you. I think, the worst thing you can do is tell somebody, well, I don't deal with that, or not be kind to them. So it sounds like what you're doing is good protocol. And that kind of ties into question 66 too, making sure that the public is informed of the board's roles and responsibilities. Sometimes I call this having an elevator speech, so that when somebody would come to me and think I could fix something with a coach or a teacher or a program or another family or another student, being able to say, I really appreciate you sharing your concerns. I have to tell you that my role as a board member isn't to do that, but we do have processes in place. So I think being comfortable sharing that with the stakeholders that talk to you, I think it's a good way to educate them as well. By the way, some school districts will put the board governance model on their website too, to help the community understand what your role is. Let's see. With these, making sure you communicate, and again, you're talking about your communications plan within the strategic plan. So I think that these will be addressed, and responses a year from now will probably look a little different. And then the last couple of questions here. Actually, this is something that you just did via the strategic planning process. So I think that as we are trying to make decisions, whether it's strategic plan or other decisions, I think it's okay to go out and seek feedback, input from community and from staff to get their ideas, and let them know that we're doing simply that. I'm just, what are your thoughts on that? Or if somebody asks us about facilities or finance, what are your thoughts on that? So you can seek out that input. You can do it in an informal, you can do it in a more formal way. And that's what you did with the strategic plan. You sought out their feedback, and then you carefully consider that input. So you had your strategic planning committee who was advisory for you. You've carefully considered everything. Tonight you looked at your strategic plan, and you as a board still had a few things that you wanted to tweak. And I think that is fine, because ultimately that is your responsibility. And that's really how it should be with a lot of the big decisions that you make. You consider, you seek out, and then you consider all the feedback that not only I bring back as a board member, but all your fellow board members. Questions, comments, thoughts? Anything on the advocacy and communication or any of the other areas that we talked about this evening? Okay, I'm going to quit doing a screen share then. So as we wind down this evening, we've had a chance to review the strategic planning process, look at your strat plans. So next steps is I will make a few of those tweaks that you talked about, and your superintendent may have a few additional things too after he looks at it. Again, if there's any other, maybe a typo or anything like that that we might have missed, we'll get those changes made. It'll come back to you so you can review it again at another meeting. The evaluation, I took some notes. I'll put that summary together and you can take a look at that and talk about maybe a goal or two that you might want to work on as a board team. One of the questions that just dawned on me that I didn't mention tonight too, that came up, and I think that was question 24, mentoring new board members. I better talk about that real quickly before we walk away this evening, but making sure, because you've got your 2 new board members, making sure that you do have a process in place. So I think both had a chance to, oh, question 21 is the one, orientation of new board members. Both had a chance to do phase 1. Pete and Troy, yep, okay. How'd that go for you?
It was good, very
Good.
informative.
Good. Lots of questions asked and answered for you, I hope.
There was.
Okay, good. So I think the board has a responsibility to continue on with that orientation. There's a new board member orientation year at a glance document that Pete and Troy would have received in the packet at phase 1. I'll include that in my notes. And there are responsibilities for superintendent, board chair, admin to the superintendent, and also mentors in helping orientate new board members. And so I'm not sure, have you talked about assigning a mentor to your new board members?
We have not talked about that.
Okay, you might want to consider it. Usually a mentor is someone who is a seasoned board member. It's usually not the chair because the chair has a lot of other responsibilities in coordinating other things, but just assigning a mentor, not somebody who can help answer some of those questions, explain some of those protocols we talked about before. The mentors should not tell the new board members what to say or how to vote at a board meeting, but just be there in support, especially in the first few years of serving. So I'll put some notes about that as well, and I'll include that document so you can take a look at that. And then your orientation for new board members might be something that's part of your protocols as well, if you decide to work on those. So with that, the process formally ends right now, except your next step will be to move forward with that strategic plan. But my work is kind of an ongoing with you. So whenever you need to tap into me as a resource, don't hesitate. I'm individually or as a group to connect with me if there's anything I can help clarify. If you'd like me to come back and facilitate any discussions for you related to the strategic plan or to the self-evaluation, I'm happy to do that. I've had schools that have asked me to come back to do an annual review with them, and they brought their strategic planning committee back together. So if there are any unique creative ways that you want to utilize me, you are more than welcome to do that. But I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with the Becker School District. I'm going to do a shout out first to your superintendent. Mr. Schmidt has been fantastic to work with. He has been easy to work with. This was a challenging time of the year when you're winding down the school year and then you're moving into the summer months and you've got staff coming and going. But your superintendent has been just great to work with and has your best interests in mind, most definitely throughout the whole process. And then as board members, I just want to say thank you to all of you for your commitment, having sat in your chair for many years as well. I know that the commitment is great, and sometimes I'm not sure about all the rewards when you're making some of those tough decisions, but just know that you're appreciated, you're valued. And I really hope that this process has brought you together as a team as well, moving forward with your strategic plan. So with that, anything else that I can, any other questions, anything else I can
A couple
help you with?
specifically, I like on the self-evaluation. So this is, I mean, it's obviously a snapshot of right now with the members
Yes.
that are here.
Mhm.
And so this is a point to be able to use this in the future
Mhm.
through MSBA. I think doing the self-evaluation and doing our, just getting the scores back doesn't cost us anything to do that, right? My recollection.
Right.
But of course, when we engage with Gail and have her time spent here, we pay for that time as part of the process. So just as we go forward, just know that you can do the self-evaluation yourself without it costing anything, and getting that feedback, as opposed to, as we engage with MSBA in that strategic planning process.
Yep, absolutely.
And then I guess it was just, do you guys accumulate this self-evaluation? Do you accumulate this across, the school boards that you work with in order to aggregate and see kind of where boards are, so to speak?
That is a really good question. We have chosen not to do that because there's so many differences between the boards. So, you really are just evaluating your board superintendent team in your school district. So really that should be the measurement that you want to take a look at. And we just did not feel that it would be fair to compare school boards. And a school board that maybe is in that high performing stage this year, it doesn't take much, as you know, for something to change very quickly, and they're back in that forming or storming stage. So there's just too many variables for that one for us to take a look at those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other members?
Gail, I would just like to thank you for your time and helping us guide us through this, and your feedback and walking us through results and everything. So thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah, I just reiterate that. So Mark and I did a lot more emails from Gail and information Gail than the rest of you did, but it was very helpful to have all that information, and like Aaron said, leading us through this whole process. So, very helpful and very well laid out, and
Thank you.
yeah, it's a crazy time, but
Mhm.
it made it easier having that information, and even sometimes having just a reminder and things. So,
Well, you do a good job, Gail, of facilitating and making sure things moving forward. I can't say enough about having a facilitator do that for the board. It's really difficult to participate in it and facilitate. So having that external piece is well worth it to get it done on this occasional basis. We, looking forward, if we have a 5-year plan, 4 years from now, again, we should be looking at, getting another update, at least 4 years, at least then, if not before. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been great working with all of you. We'll still be in touch too. So have a good rest of your evening. Have a good rest of your summer. And I'm guessing your Superintendent Schmidt and I will be in touch for sure, because we'll get that revised strategic plan together. So very good. Okay. All right. I will sign off then. Thank you so much.
Gail, and we are.